Father, we come right now at this appointed hour just to call upon you. We ask that your presence be found and felt in this room, that this room be quiet, and that although while we have come because we're hearing our two candidates for leadership in this city, we know that they must seek you, God, and they must know you. So, Father, we ask and we pray that this gathering, that it will honor you and that it will lift you up and that you will be the center of all that we say, all that we think, and all that we do. Father, we ask that you will show us the love that we must have for one another, that you will lift that up out of each and every one of us. May this whole city, may this election, may this whole city, Father, just be a glory to your holy name. We pray now in the name of Jesus and in the name of others who are gathered here who might not know you for themselves. We pray in their name. In the name of Jesus, I pray. Amen.
Amen.
Good evening. My name is Casey Rush, and I am the brainchild of Black Community Forums, Inc. It is my pleasure and honor this evening to introduce and honor the moderator of tonight's event, Mary D. Mary D. was born in Chicago, Illinois, raised in New Orleans, Louisiana. She developed a passion for journalism during school. She began her long relationship with broadcast media in 1966 as a radio personality, and based upon the strength of her reputation, Mary D. moved to WGN-TV in 1972, where she gained experience in newscasting as a staff announcer and talk show host. Dee continued in television, becoming more involved in the administrative aspects of television production. She eventually was appointed Director of Community Relations at WGN-TV. In this capacity, Dee served as a liaison between WGN-TV and the many social organizations that compose Chicago's civic community. Dee retired as WGN's TV Director of Community Relations in the fall of 2008. Dee is also committed to extensive charitable work, including fundraising on behalf of the homeless, orphans, and victims of domestic violence. Also a strong advocate for her education, Dee has hosted the United Negro College Fund telethon for several years. She also hosted the prestigious Easter Seals telethon. She is one of the founders of the Chicago-based organization called Athletes for a Better Education. She is the recipient of numerous awards, including the AT&T Outstanding Community Role Model Award, the North American Council of Adoptable Children Outstanding Leadership Award, the YWCA of Metropolitan Chicago Woman of the Year Award, and the Chicago Academy of Teaching Arts and Sciences Lifetime Achievement Award. Please join me in welcoming to the stage our very own Miss Mary D.
I want a little extra hand there. My girl was a little bit nervous. Did she do well? Right. Thank you, sir. Thank you. I say thank you on behalf of the gentleman that I encouraged to come out here first. He was totally unexpected out. Congressman Bobby Rush and the Reverend Bobby Rush. Please give him a warm welcome. say this before we even get started. Little did I know that God was going to keep me here on this fine earth to be able to see two highly sensitive, sensible, qualified African-American women. Now I'm going to try to stick to the script. It's hard for me, but I will do my best. We have two fabulous people here on stage with us that I just talked about for a moment. I'm so excited. Two candidates for the mayor of this great city called Chicago. Lori Lightfoot and Tony Frederico. Our panelists are old friends of mine, so I'm happy to rejoin them. Maudlin Eureka, Chicago Sun-Times, hands up. Tiffany Walden from the Tribe. Dorothy Lavelle, the Crusader and everything. Charles Thomas, formerly of ABC TV. And the great Cliff W.B. Black Community Forum Committee are wonderful people, and they have come in to help us get this going. So I thank Casey for coming out to introduce me, and I thank you very much. Tiffany Walden from the Tribe is a freelance journalist whose work has appeared in the Chicago Reader, Chicago Magazine, Tribune, Vice, Orlando Sentinel, and much more. Tiffany is co-founder and editor-in-chief of the Tribe. Oh, she's a Northwestern University alum. I have to say that. Hey. Maudlin Eureka, Chicago Sun-Times, an award-winning Chicago Sun-Times urban affairs reporter, columnist with 30 years experience in journalism, public relations, and government. She pens the Sun-Times Chicago Chronicles, a long-form column on people and places that make Chicago tick. About 24 years there, has been doing what she's been doing it well, a frequent guest contributor on PBS TV's Chicago Tonight, Week in Review, and Fox 32, Good Day Chicago. We can't forget that one. And then it goes on CNN, TV One, ABC, CBS, NPR, and WBEZ. She has a whole list, but that's what you get when you sit down and say, I'm going to do it. Charles Thomas is here with us, journalist. All right. Charles Thomas has worked as a journalist for the past, get this, 45 years, including as political reporter and editor for WLS-TV, Channel 7, right here in Night City, Chicago. He covered politics and government at Chicago City Hall, the state capitol in Springfield, the White House, and Congress before his retirement in 2017. When I saw Charles tonight, I said, Charles, you look like you've been off a while. That's the look Charles Thomas has of a person who has retired and is happy. Cliff Kelly, WVON Radio, for more than 30 years. Cliff Kelly has been a figure in the ever-interesting and always controversial arena of Chicago's political stage. Kelly's expertise was honed through 16 years as a member of the City Council, made him a much sought-after commentator, speaker, analyst, not only locally, but on national and international issue-oriented television and talk radio programs. I could tell you everything about him, but we don't have time. Dorothy Lavelle, the Crusader newspaper, Yes.
Yes.
Since 1968, she's served as editor and publisher of the Crusader newspaper group, Chicago and Gary, Indiana. And after the death of her husband, co-founder of both publications in 1940 and 61, respectively, once the helm of the company. She instituted modern changes to enhance the production and effectiveness of newspapers, not just their newspaper. She also stabilized her holdings by purchasing and upgrading the buildings which house its editorial and production facilities. And since the very beginning, she has just taken over and run everybody's business. As it comes near newspapers, she can smile because she knows that that's the truth. And I only say that because I love you dearly. The Black Community Forums, Inc. are the ones who are helping me do what I do, you in your comfort here tonight, and to make sure that this evening is worth your while in coming out. I want to take a moment and say thank you to each and every one of you for being here tonight. You could have stayed home and not learned maybe something new, but because you came out, I just want to say we all appreciate you being here, and I am happy to see you. So, I didn't introduce those candidates, did I? I don't think I need to. Do you think that? No. I didn't think so. I think you have seen these two candidates in this city. I think that they are women who have been in government, know what's going on, and deserve your vote. That is the most important thing. Who can tell me when we vote again? Can I hear you again? Okay, I might come back out and ask you.
Oh, you do have early voting.
Today, people started voting today. But those people who like to wait around, it's April 2nd for anyone who did not know that, so that no one has an excuse not to vote, to be there. I am supposed to tell you something. Our candidates will have 2 minutes in an opening statement. And we will start with Ms. Lori Lightfoot.
Thank you. I think this is one of the most important elections of our lifetime. It's truly the first competitive elections that we've had since Harold Washington ran in 1986. I think it's a real opportunity for us to speak our values, not just about today and tomorrow, but really about the kind of city that we want. We went through probably 50 different community forums leading up to the February 26th election. But one of them stands out in my mind based on a question that was asked. We were at Whitney Young, and a senior said, I'm going to be graduating from high school, going off to college for 4 years. Tell me why I should come back to Chicago after I finish my education. I thought that was a really smart question. And to me, it really ought to be the primary narrative of this discussion over these next 2+ weeks. We need to create a city in which our young people feel a sense of ownership and connection, because we've controlled the violence. We have provided good quality neighborhood schools, and we have a comprehensive economic plan to uplift the quality of life in every neighborhood, not just in the downtown area. We need to provide hope for that young person, that their life and their livelihood can be here in the city because they can afford to live. There's a range of issues that the next mayor is going to have to take on, but I think the challenge, but also the opportunity that we have to make the case and the reality of why this is a great city, why it's important for our young people to stay and invest their lives and their energy in our future is critically important. I look forward to the conversation tonight. I look forward to being able to articulate a clear vision for change, which is absolutely necessary if we are going to be able to move this city forward and break from the corrupt political machine. Thank you very much.
Good evening. I'd like to thank Chicago State, our host, Congressman Rush, who brought us together, Mary D., and our panel. We're very grateful to all of you. And of course, I'm grateful to all of you who came out tonight. You know, Chicago is a beautiful city. We have wonderful neighborhoods. But if it's going to survive and thrive, we have to focus on growth and opportunity. In the past, our focus on growth has just been on downtown. But we have to focus on our neighborhoods, like the South Side neighborhoods that I served for almost 20 years in the City Council. And we have to focus on opportunity, because everyone in the city has to believe that there's opportunity for themselves and their children if our city is going to survive and thrive. You know, I was elected alderman on my third try. I beat the machine on my third try. And when I served in the City Council, I sponsored and passed every single affordable housing and living wage ordinance that came before the body, because I know how important it is for working families to be able to afford to live in our city, and important for our people to be able to believe that there's an opportunity for them and their children. I worked with community residents to strengthen our neighborhood public schools, principals, parents, and community residents. I worked with developers, the Chicago Housing Authority, and community residents to build mixed-income housing in my ward, 1,500 units. And I worked with police commanders and local officers to address the public safety challenges that our communities face. And these are the same challenges that we face today in the city of Chicago. And I have a plan to address them. The same plan I had when I was alderman. Work hard with community residents and stakeholders to address the challenges you face. I'm very grateful for the chance I had to serve as alderman. I look forward to the opportunity to serve as mayor. We need change, and I have experience in translating change into action.
Yeah.
Our panelists will now ask a question, and they will have their time to ask that question. The candidate will have 2 minutes to answer, with a follow-up of 30 seconds on rebuttal. Any questions? We'll start with the tribe. Tiffany Walden.
Hi everyone, thank you so much for having us here, and thank you to the candidates for being here as well. One of the big things at the tribe is that we want to give agency to Black youth. So we reached out to Black youth to ask them questions that they would like to ask you all. So our first question is from a 28-year-old organizer named Rachel Williams. And her question is, will you hold Chicago Public Schools accountable to comply with the Chicago's consent decree before the 2019-2020 school year? How will you do so?
You can. In order.
Well, the consent decree is an option. So there's a monitor, there's a federal judge, so we have to make sure that we are being compliant with the mandates of the consent decree. And sadly, we should never have gotten to this point. We should be providing all the opportunity necessary for individuals who are different kinds of learners. But I'm committed to making sure that we provide those opportunities and go above and beyond the consent decree. And how do you do it? You make sure you have the right people in place who actually understand and are going to abide by the consent decree and make sure that there's compliance. The monitor's job is to assess whether or not the commitments that were made as part of the consent decree are actually being followed in a timely fashion. And I will make sure that we are focused in making sure that we meet those mandates as quickly as possible so that we can be true to the quality of education that those students and their parents deserve.
30 seconds. We have a real challenge in Chicago because right now you can predict the quality of someone's public schools by the zip code that they live in. And we need to be sure that we have good public schools in all of our neighborhoods. And neighborhood public schools are critical because they take all of our kids. They take all of our kids. In contrast to the magnet schools, the selective enrollment schools, the charter schools. And that's why it's important that we prioritize investments in neighborhood public schools. And not just in teachers, but in bilingual support, in special education teachers, in social workers and psychologists. We've got to provide the wraparound services that enable our young people to do well in school. And not every school has the same needs. Right now there's a funding formula that is on a per pupil basis, but we have to factor in the special needs of some of our communities.
Time's up.
Thank you.
Thank you. May I ask whoever is operating the clock here on the stage to please reset it so that it is absolutely correct. Yes.
I thought you said we had 2 minutes to answer, it's only 30 seconds.
30 seconds to answer.
Okay.
2 minutes to present. 2 minutes to answer the question. 30 seconds rebuttal. And the other person is rebuttal. Our next presenter is Maudlin Ijerica, Chicago Sun-Times.
All right, thank you, Ms. Lightfoot, and thank you, Ms. Preckwinkle, for being here, and thank you to the audience. My first question goes to the the election that led to this runoff. So neither one of you garnered the city's significant black vote on the south side and on the west sides of Chicago. To what do you both attribute this phenomenon? And what lessons did you learn from those black voters who eschewed you both during the election?
Well, let me just say that I'm very grateful for all the good people who supported me. I'm grateful for their help and support. In the African American wards, I won some and Willie Wilson won some. Those are the two candidates who won wards in the African American community. You know, I have spent my entire public life serving the African American community on the south side and then the county as a whole. I spent 19 years as alderman serving the communities of Hyde Park and South Kenwood, but also North Kentwood, Oakland, Douglas, Grand Boulevard. And those were the communities in which I invested most of my time and resources. Those were the communities in which I invested most of my time and resources. And I think that's reflected in the vote totals. You know, my opponent lives on the north side, and I don't know what her connection is to either the south or the west side, but I have been an elected official on the south side for my entire public life as alderman and as committeeman. And I've worked hard to build up the communities of my ward. I talked about the work that we did with parents and principals and community residents to strengthen our neighborhood public schools. The work that we did to build up the community, not just revitalize the housing, 1,500 units of housing, most of it affordable rental, but also supporting the businesses, expanding a shopping center, building a new shopping center, supporting the existing businesses and helping them grow. And last but not least, working with local commanders, police officers, and community residents to address the public safety challenges that those communities faced. And I have been a champion of working families my entire life. I'm a supporter of the $15 an hour minimum wage. I'm the only candidate who says not only do we need a $15 an hour minimum wage, but I have a plan to put it in place by 2021. And I'm also a big proponent of sick pay. In the county, we not only provided minimum wage for our county workers, not just county workers government, but county workers period, but also paid sick leave.
Lori?
Your question,
30-second rebuttal. Let me explain. When you get, quiet please. When the panelists ask a question, you get 2 minutes to answer. And the other opponent gets 30 seconds rebuttal.
This time thing, I want me to write it down on something. The audience is voting.
It's 30 seconds on the clock.
What did she say? 30 seconds?
Excuse me.
That's not a long time.
We will give each panelist a chance to ask their question, and each candidate will get an opportunity to answer that question, no rebuttal. Mr. Jackson.
All right, I think we're good now. Look, I think you have to look at the fact that Dr. Willie Wilson, who won the lion's share of the majority black awards, has spent decades being invested in the community, long before he ran for election. And I'm grateful to have the endorsement of Dr. Wilson because he believes that like I do, that we can't address the systematic, deep challenges in the black community on the south and the west sides in particular without having change, fundamentally. So if you look at those words also, in those words where he won, I believe that I was competitive. And since the election, in addition to Dr. Wilson's endorsement, we are receiving, there'll be more to come, endorsements of faith leaders, community stakeholders, as well as elected officials who also understand that to solve and address the deep challenges that are in our communities, starting with the lack of investment, the out-of-control violence that is plaguing way too many of our communities. We can't keep voting for the same old, same old. And there was a question about whether I had some kind of commitment. I'm a black woman living in Chicago. I started my life in Hyde Park for 3 years. I've been all over the city, and I understand fundamentally the problems of lack of investment, the lack of resources. And I just also want to remind folks, I jumped into this race in May of 2018 because I knew that Rahm Emanuel could not get a third term if our communities were going to have any shot at surviving. I didn't wait until I was ready to jump into the race. There are issues that we must address and solve as a community, and we have to have people who have the courage to stand up and say, I will speak for those communities who deserve a seat at the table and whose voices need to be heard, and I am such a leader.
Thank you. I apologize for any confusion up here, but we have cleared that up with the clock being right. We have 2 minutes now. Charles Thomas is the next panelist.
You know, during most of my time in Chicago, I've either worked or lived in the downtown area. Right now, we're in the midst of a construction boom, the likes of which we have not seen in certainly my lifetime. What are you guys going to do to increase the number of black skilled trade workers on those construction projects downtown? We don't get those jobs, and both of you are celebrating your union endorsements. What are you going to tell those people once you get to be mayor that they're going to have to hire black people at the rate that we live in this city and region? President Kirkland.
I'm a teacher by profession, and I think it's really critical that we address the challenges that our young people face as they enter the workforce. And not everybody wants to go to college. Not everybody sees that as a career path. So we have to be sure that trades positions are open to people of all descriptions. And it's particularly important in the African American community that we have an opportunity to pursue the trades. And let me just say, you know, Alderman Hairston and I think Alderman Pat Dowell, shut down development on Lakeshore Drive because we didn't see the participation of African American contractors and African American workers. So we took action when we did not see our community's representative work being done in our community. And whenever developers came into my ward and wanted to do work, I talked to them about the fact that they had to include African Americans, both as workers and as participants in the projects. Particularly, this was true on the CHA transformation projects, which were the biggest developments in my ward. And we had very significant African American participation in those developments. So this is something that I've done with the community and with other elected officials, insisted that there be opportunity for African American businesses and African American workers. We just finished the ambulatory care center as part of the West Loop expansion of Stroger Hospital. And we had, not only to meet the MBWD requirements for the county, but we hired within the area almost 20% of the workforce. Within a 3-mile radius, 20% of the workforce came directly from the communities that were immediately around that ambulatory care center. So I have experience working with other community residents and elected officials in insisting that our communities be represented in the projects that are being developed in our ward, and particularly the construction projects.
Thank you.
Yes. You asked the question of what would I tell them when I become mayor? Let me tell you what I've told them now. Every single union that I've talked to, the first question for me is, what's your pipeline? How do you make sure that you're creating real opportunity for black and brown folks to participate in the trades? And it's particularly true with respect to the laborers union, because that is the gateway for a lot of the other trades that build upon the skill sets that the training that they get in the laborers union. And I've visited a lot of these apprentice programs now, particularly over the last couple of weeks. And what I've seen in some, not nearly enough, is an actual commitment to diversity. But we've got to do much, much more. I want to make sure that we are not just relying upon the unions to do their part. I want to make sure that we're providing vocational educational opportunities in our high schools. We have a focus in CPS right now on college or bust. And what I'm also hearing from employers is that there are a lot of jobs in manufacturing, in tech, in other industries that could pay a good middle-class salary if only our kids were well-trained in these different apprenticeships and trades. So what I want to see us do is bring that education back into our high schools so that they have a relationship with employers, they have the internships during the school year and during the summer, so that when they graduate, they're able to step into these highly paid middle-class jobs. So I don't want to just rely upon the unions. The unions are important, and we absolutely need to make sure that we're speaking our values in the contracts with them and press them to open up the doors of opportunity to black and brown folks. But I want to also build that pipeline through our high schools, through our community colleges, in ways that it doesn't exist right now.
Thank you very much. I might also add right now, while the clock is resetting, that we will have an opportunity to have some questions from the audience at the very end. Mr. Kelly is our next panelist.
Thank you so much. Appreciate it. And good evening to everyone. Just would like you to know that two things, because of the aging process, and I'm suffering, and also the fact that I live in Chicago on the south side, I voted already. I mean, I'll be here tomorrow. I'm only saying that jokingly, I hope. I want to tell so whoever I voted for, you won't know, but don't disappoint me, all right? Fire and Police Academy, that's been talked about. I'd like to hear from you both about what is that really going to do. There's a lot of opposition to it, of course, with and in addition to that, the thing that bothers me more than anything is the fact that we still do not have the African Americans in the police department and in the fire department that we should have. It is so obvious, and that's one of the reasons why we can't solve crime. Because with so few detectives of color, people aren't going to talk to, particularly when you think about Laquan McDonald. I mean, what are we talking about? So, you know, what can we do to help us? I can remember when I was a kid, you know, back when the earth was cooling, we had Officer Friendly. I still remember the squad car number, 151. Amazing. I won't go on. You know what I'm talking about. Please help us on this. Whoever, whichever wants to start.
Let's talk about the Fire and Police Academy first. I've been opposed to the plan that was unfortunately passed last week by the City Council. And the reason I've been opposed to the plan is this. I believe that whenever we're going to make an investment, particularly one of that size, now it's estimated to be $95 million, but the truth is it'll be far more than that when all said and done. It has to start with a conversation with the community and what the community needs. And it's not enough just to get the sign off from the elected official. We can talk all day about automatic prerogative, which I'm happy to address. But what I know is in those West Side communities, I've spent a lot of time there, particularly recently, the only economic development that's going on, there's some churches, there's some funeral homes, a couple gas stations, an occasional corner market, which, by the way, oftentimes isn't owned by people who live in that community and are not hired by. So we need to be thinking about these kind of investments, not as a one-off, but in a way that actually meets the needs of those communities. And that is the fundamental problem that I have with that Fire and Police Academy, because in talking to residents on the West Side, that conversation never happened before the plan was announced, before the first tranches of money was spent to acquire the land, and then the RFP went out, RFQ and then an RFP. I don't think that's the right way that we should be investing in communities who are starving for resources. So that's the issue that I have. Secondly, you raised, I think, a very good point about the absence of diversity in the people that are actually going into the academy. What we've seen over the last few years is there's been a huge effort to get people to take the test, but the yield isn't there when it comes to black folks getting into the academy. It's a significant issue. I pressed the superintendent and the people in charge on that. They keep telling me, no, there's no disparate effect. But the reality is we're not seeing those people in the seats in the academy, and we have to change that.
Thank you. Our next panelist is Dorothy Bell.
I think I can answer the question.
I'm sorry, I apologize.
You know, I've been an opponent of the police academy for a very long time, and what I've said is that if we're going to make a $95 million investment on the West Side, it should be a different kind of investment. These are communities that have struggled with disinvestment and neglect for decades, and no new housing is being built, there are no new businesses being built. If we're going to invest in those communities, that's the kind of investment that we need to make. And those are the kind of investments that will build those communities. Affordable housing and in the businesses. And I've proposed that we not only dramatically increase our investments in affordable housing, but that we support small businesses in those communities as well through microloans and through grant programs that allow them to start or sustain or build their business. We've got to invest in our neighborhoods. We have to have balanced development. I've talked repeatedly about the fact that there's a lot going on downtown. You mentioned it, Charles. You live downtown. There's a lot going on downtown, but we have to invest in our neighborhoods as well. The downtown is an economic engine, but we can't have a world-class city unless we invest in our neighborhoods. And that's the work that I did for decades, working with community residents to build neighborhoods, to make our communities stronger. And let me just say, we have to invest in our police. We surely have to invest more in their training. We have to invest more in supervision. We have to be sure that they're accountable. And let me remind you, one of the big challenges we have, and this goes back to the detective corps, we not only don't have enough detectives, we don't have black and brown detectives, who are the people who could get information from the community about what's really going on. Because I've repeatedly said, you know, you watch TV and you think that crimes are solved in the forensic labs. They're solved by talking to people on the street. And the only way in which people will talk to you is if they have confidence in the police. And the real challenge is that in many of our communities, people are wary of the police and view them as an occupying force. And until we invest in community policing and greater collaboration with communities, better training, better supervision, we will not have the kind of cooperation that we need to solve the crimes that plague so many of our neighborhoods.
Thank you. Our next panelist, Dorothy Lavelle, Chicago Crusade. Thank you.
That's okay. Well, I knew how to get it.
You always know that.
Thank you. Concerns of gentrification persist as the Obama Foundation moves forward on its plans to build its $500 million Obama Center and Library without a community benefits agreement. Voters in South Shore in February passed an ordinance to establish a community benefits agreement in their ward. But as mayor of Chicago, how do you plan to make sure the ordinance is enforced and the needs of the residents are protected from rising rents and displacements?
Let me just say that I'm a big believer in community benefits agreements. When the Olympics was proposed for 2016 in Chicago, we worked with community, that is, me and my staff in the fourth ward, worked with community residents and advocates to be sure that there was a community benefits agreement for the Olympic Village, which was proposed for the fourth ward. And we spent innumerable hours hashing out that community benefits agreement. And we got it passed in the city council. I took it to the city council and got it passed. And it ensured community participation in the planning process, participation of minority and women-owned businesses, and it was a real living document that outlined how the Olympic Committee was going to interact with the community as it built the Olympic Village. So I have experience actually doing this, working with the community to create a community benefits agreement. And let me just say, although Michelle and Barack Obama are not in favor of a community benefits agreement, the city can put together a community benefits agreement with the community. We don't need the presidential center to be part of that process. We can make commitments, the mayor can make commitments on behalf of the city and work with community members to put together a CBA, and that's what I would do. And I think it's really important that we look forward to providing affordable housing in those communities, working with community residents to try to be sure that gentrification doesn't push people out who've lived there for generations or rented there. We need to be sure that people in the community reap the benefits of having a presidential center in their community. And that hard work is work that I've done before with community residents around the Olympic Community Benefits Agreement. And it's something that I think that's important that the city pursue, regardless of whether or not Barack and Michelle believe that it's a good idea. I believe in the library, I think it's a good thing, but I think the city needs to step up and do the community benefits agreement with the residents.
Well, if I'm fortunate enough to become mayor, I'm going to make sure that I get involved and resolve this dispute. Unfortunately, this should have been handled on the front end, and it's not. The minute that the various locations were announced about the presidential center, land speculation started. And it started to drive up property values, started to drive up rents, and This is a classic situation where the city should have led, it should have been engaged, and it should have been working with those community members. And now we know that there's a lawsuit that's been filed, which a judge recently said could proceed. So the process of starting the project could be indefinitely delayed as a result of that lawsuit. Now that doesn't stem directly from the community benefits agreement. It's something slightly different. The allegations that have been made in that complaint. But fundamentally what the mayor has to do is step up and lead. We know for decades that when a big development happens, there's going to be land speculation, and that the long-term residents in an area have to be protected. That's something that should have been part of the planning that went into the presidential center, but unfortunately that didn't happen. But that doesn't mean we can't get it resolved. And I'm not sure how we can effectively protect the rights of the residents in that area without the center being a signatory to that agreement. And I would have concern that would start a dangerous precedent where developers can do whatever they want, and the city then has to come and clean up on the back end to try to protect residents' rights. This should be an intrinsic part of the deal that the Department of Planning puts in place so that we're thinking about how residents are going to be affected, what the impacts are going to be before any plan is submitted to any of the city council committees or the full city council for approval. That's what should have been done this time, and we'll have to get that resolved, and I'm committed to making sure that the development doesn't lead to any further displacement of people in the community so their rights are protected.
Thank you. Do all of you have cards when you came in? Did everyone get a card? If you don't have a card, would you raise your hand, please? If you don't have a card, please raise your hand. There's someone passing cards out over here. We want you to be able to write your question down. We will choose 3 of those cards, and I will...
They got cards on both sides. Cards on both sides.
There's someone on the other side giving out cards. Meantime, I want to take a moment to say thank you to our panelists, Maudlin Ijerica, Chicago Sun-Times, Tiffany Walden from The Tribe, Dorothy Lavelle, The Crusader, Cliff Kelly from WVON Radio, and Charles Thomas, formerly of ABC TV. Thank you. Nice hand for our panelists. Our event facilitator is over here passing out at least one of them. There are 3 people here from the Black Community Forum Committee Incorporated. Raise your hand so that they get a chance to see who you are. They have been very helpful in strategizing how to get all of this through. Okay. Congressman Bobby Rush would like to have a second round of questions from the panelists. Panelists, is that all right? We will take a question from a panelist. Love those bright faces over there from the panelists. All happy. And we will have a response from each of our candidates, 1 minute.
Do we start now?
I was just checking on our, you're okay. Please write your question down. We will get to you as soon as this round of questions have finished. We'll start with Tiffany again from the tribe.
Thank you. I think at the end of the day, Black people are just concerned about whether they should trust you or not. A lot of people worry that President Preckwinkle, that you have ties to Chicago's machine politics as usual. You have ties to Ed Berg, and he's under investigation right now. Lori Lightfoot, there's concerns about you being associated with the police. We just saw you the other day comment that you would turn a lot of the shuttered schools into mini police academies. So I guess at the end of the day, the question really comes down to why should black people in Chicago on the south and west sides, even on the north sides of Chicago that are rarely discussed in the political realm, why should we trust you? Why should they get your vote?
Well, I think it's a fair question, but I think what we have to ask ourselves is, what do we need in this city? And I think what we fundamentally need is change. We've had years and years of elected officials, decades of experience, talk a good game around the time of election, and then not deliver for our community. I can remember when the first time that I came to Chicago and recognizing the areas that were so deprived of resources, and that nothing seemed to be happening, no plan for change. And that's what motivated me to get involved in this race from the outset. As I mentioned, we have neighborhoods where 25% unemployment is routine, where 40% of African American children are living in poverty, and whole neighborhoods are dependent upon some kind of government assistance for their daily bread. Now, you're fine with that. You have a choice. But if you believe, as I do, that we must go in a fundamentally different direction, then I believe I am your candidate.
Yes. You know, I think it's easy to talk about change. It's hard to actually make change. And that's what I've done my entire political career. Transformation. When I came in as president of the county, we had a healthcare system that was challenged both financially and in terms of the quality of care it delivered. It's now fiscally stable. We serve 320,000 people through our county care program. They have access to quality care. That's half our budget. 40% of our budget is criminal justice reform. Working with the stakeholders, I have reduced the jail population by 4,000 people. People who had been in the jail accused of nonviolent crimes often spent weeks or months waiting for their hearings or trials. Now we have 6,000 people in the jail. When I walked in the door, there were 10 or 11. It's hard to make change, and I've worked to do it, both transforming our public health system and bringing reform to our criminal justice system. And as alderman, as I said earlier, I worked with community residents to strengthen our neighborhood schools, to rebuild our communities, and to address the public safety challenges that our neighborhoods face. It's hard work. It's hard work.
My question is, it's really easy to talk in platitudes. What do you think, each one of you, are the top 3 issues facing the black community in Chicago today? And which one would you and could you address immediately coming in the door?
It's really important that we focus on the health and strength of our neighborhoods. And the first challenge to our health and strength of our neighborhoods is violence. We have to address that challenge first and foremost. And I would work with Police Superintendent Eddie Johnson to have a plan for the next 6 months. I have said, however, that I think that we need a new superintendent who's willing to acknowledge that there is a code of silence in the police department and racism in the police department. But we have to have a transition plan for the summer. It's also important that we focus on a plan to rebuild our neighborhoods in the same way I worked to do that when I was alderman of the 4th Ward. And secondly, it's important that we focus on our neighborhood public schools and change the funding formula so it isn't per pupil based, but it's based on need. Because many of our students and many of our communities face challenges that require additional resources. We can't say that every school has the same needs. Many of our schools in the African American community need additional resources. Public safety challenge.
Say it again, please.
The public safety challenge.
Thank you.
So I think we have to look at the reasons why people are leaving our city. We we continue to be one of the few metropolitan areas in the country that's losing population. And the people who are leaving are black folks. And why are they leaving? Violence, lack of hope, lack of investment, affordable housing, and lack of jobs. So for me, the top priority has to be the violence issue, because it's impossible to do much more if we don't address and solve that problem. In the last 7 years since Rahm Emanuel was sworn in, over 23,000 people have been shot. That's a devastating number. Larger than the town that I grew up in, and every single one of those people is a victim whose lives have been irreparably changed and harmed because of the violence. No business is going to invest where they don't feel safe. And if we don't deal with those issues immediately, we can't get to the other issues that are pressing, like lack of investment, affordable housing, and jobs. So the top priority for me is dealing with the plan for violence.
You support Chicago as a welcoming city, a sanctuary city, but there is a conversation that is developing around the country as to whether or not undocumented residents of a sanctuary city should be allowed to vote in municipal elections. I would like to hear a yes or no in your answers as you explain yourself, but would you support an effort to allow undocumented immigrants to vote in City of Chicago elections? Madam President.
No.
You know, the answer is no. There's a lot of issues regarding sanctuary city.
That's good.
But I'm not hearing that issue.
That's good, because we kept it really short, and I want to ask another question in my time. And that is, how will you reform the parking enforcement system in the city of Chicago?
I think we have to understand that the whole parking violations, both moving and non-moving violations, that whole system is broken. You know, if you go to traffic court, all you see is a parade of black and brown people. And Mother Jones did a study of the ticketing process in Chicago, not for speeding, not for moving violations, but for non-moving violations, and found that 8 out of the 10 communities that had the highest number of tickets were African American communities. And this is a function of hyper-policing in our neighborhoods. The ways in which the police are often pushed to have a ticket quota and to target people in their beats who are guilty of just minor violations. And many people are pushed into bankruptcy or lose their vehicles as a result of these parking meter violations and parking violations. We have to reform this system, which has disproportionately impacted our black communities.
You asked what specifically we would do. I think we have to scrap the system.
Yeah.
Obviously, the red light cameras are a huge problem, but I've also been hearing from people not only about the ticketing, but that they're losing their cars. They're having the cars towed away. If they don't pay these draconian fines in a short period of time, the cars are sold at auction or they're sold for scrap. I mean, that, and I've actually seen the data. We are balancing the budget for the city on the backs of black and brown folks. I think we have to look at banning the boot. The red light camera system is a farce. It's not for safety. It's clearly a revenue generating activity. We also want to look at reforming the ticketing. If you get a ticket in a spot, you leave that spot, you leave your car there. What happens now is you get multiple tickets in the same day for the same violation, which makes no sense whatsoever. So I'm very focused on this. We will be announcing program shortly to address this very issue, but it's absolutely discriminatory. There's no doubt about it. The data supports that. We've got to change it.
One of the problems we have here, of course, is some of these communities, that used to be great, Now, if you wanted a third airport, you could do it right there without even tearing down a building, because we have so many vacancies. A lot of people, oh yeah.
That's the truth.
A lot of people do not understand, and I would like you both, of course, to address this, TIF financing, tax increment financing. A lot of people know of it, they don't know exactly what it is and how you would use it, please. Whichever.
So the TIF financing is essentially peels off a layer of the property tax assessment and puts it into areas that are defined geographically to support economic development in economically distressed neighborhoods. All sounds good, except it doesn't work. What we know, for example, is TIF monies have been used to fill the operating budget of the city. TIF dollars have been used to lure businesses to the downtown area, which is not economically distressed. And the other problem with it, which we're looking at, and hopefully we'll propose a legislative fix here shortly, is that these areas depend on the property tax values. By definition, they're economically distressed. And so there's not the kind of revenues in economically distressed areas that there should be, so the TIF funds always run short. And right now, under state legislation, the TIF monies where there's a surplus or more lucrative areas are not portable to areas where the money is most needed. So we have to fundamentally fix that. There's another problem with vacancies, which I'll address when I have more time. But there's another problem here which I think we can also address.
Time's up. Thank you. Last panelist.
No, I think I can answer that. You know, I think TIFs are important economic development tools. We use TIFs in the 4th Ward to support affordable housing developments, Willard Square, and Hearts United. We use them in CHA transformation sites to build mixed income housing, affordable housing, CHA housing, market rate housing. We created 6 TIFs, 5 of them were focused on affordable housing and mixed income development. So it's an important economic development tool. The problem is it's used indiscriminately. The most valuable real estate in the city, downtown, is now in one TIF or another. We don't need economic development catalysts downtown. We need to wind down those TIFs, eliminate them. We need to declare TIF surpluses in other areas and bring that revenue back into the general fund. And we need to figure out how we can use the TIF instrument in communities where it really needs it, as opposed to using it in parts of the city where development is going to take place anyway. And that's where we are today. We're using it indiscriminately, and it doesn't benefit the communities that need it most.
Thank you. You talked about TIFs, but what is your agenda to really stimulate jobs and economic development in Black neighborhoods on the south and west sides of our city?
You know, let me talk about what I focused on when I was alderman. And again, it was 3 things: strengthening our schools, building up our communities, and addressing the violence. It's very important that you work with community residents when you're talking about community building. And so we always had community planning processes when we were looking at a new development. And the development got vetted in the community. Not just where it would be located, but the standards of construction. And I worked very closely with various neighborhood groups to be sure that we got the kind of housing that people really wanted in their neighborhoods. That's the first thing. And we've got to use every single development tool that's available. The Illinois Housing Development Authority resources, the new federal program, the opportunity zones. We need to use our own resources in the city as well as the federal government's money that comes to us for housing. So there are a variety of kinds of financing available. We need to use all of them, but most importantly, we need to work with community residents to be sure that the development that comes into their neighborhood is the development that they want.
Time. Thank you. Thank you to the panelists.
Look, I think we have to do a number of different things, but fundamentally, we need to focus on those neighborhoods that are most economically distressed, because many of them are the ones that are most crime-plagued. And we need, in effect, a Marshall Plan for each of those neighborhoods. Part of the problem in the city is the city hasn't led on economic development. We haven't had a land use plan since 1966. And what that means is how, where, and which neighborhoods get invested completely depends upon the vagaries of the developers, most of whom don't want to go south of Roosevelt Road and don't want to go west of Ashland. That's why it's so fundamentally important for the city to lead, to use real grants, micro-lending to build up small businesses, to use the opportunity zones, to reform the TIFs, and really focus on building up small business activity, making sure that we've got transportation resources, affordable housing, and rebuilding the social safety net where we don't have access to good quality medical care, there are food deserts, there are pharmacy deserts, and the like. That requires a comprehensive plan that the city must lead and not leave it up to developers as happening now.
Thank you to our panelists. And thank you. Now, again, I have 4 questions here that will go directly to our candidates. Attorney Franklin, what will be your first order of business upon becoming mayor to stimulate economic growth on the south and west sides?
Same question.
Do you have anything to add to that? This is from the audience.
You know, there's a new economic model, and that is that companies come to cities, communities, where there's a diverse labor pool. And workers come to cities where the wages are good. I'm a supporter of the $15 an hour minimum wage. No one who works 40 hours a week should live in poverty. And I have a plan to put it in place by 2021. That's the first thing. We need a $15 an hour wage to support our working families. And then we need things like microloans for small businesses. Using the Neighborhood Opportunity Fund instead of a rebate program, make it a grant program. So microloans and grants to support our businesses. And we have to work with the downtown developers who have prospered so much as the downtown booms to get them, use that whatever leverage we can in the mayor's office to get them to invest in our neighborhoods as well. We've got to be sure that there's linked development, not just development downtown, but development in our neighborhoods from the same people who are benefiting from the prosperity that we see downtown.
Lori?
Let me just drill down on a point that I made in response to the last question, and that's about small businesses. Having worked in the city's procurement department and in my law practice, work with small, middle market, and large corporations, the one thing that you consistently hear about small businesses is the problem of access to capital. There are a number of things that the city can do today to solve that problem. Number one is making sure that in the $2 billion plus procurement process the city engages in every single year, we have contracts that are small enough for small businesses to take on those contracts by themselves and not have to say, "Mother, may I," to larger companies. Number two, we need to speak our values in the contracting that we do and ask other larger corporations, what are you doing in your private sector work to build wealth in Black and brown communities by hiring our businesses? Number three, we have to convert the Neighborhood Opportunity Fund from a matching grant to a pure grant and to micro-lending. And we have to use the bullet pamphlet of the mayor's office to make sure that we are focusing on banks and other financial lenders to open up the doors of capital for small businesses. And we need to build incubators, not just in the downtown, but in our neighborhoods, so that our entrepreneurs have the opportunity to take advantage of the peer-to-peer content that is important for and that happens in incubators.
What do you want to do to help small business strive?
It's like the same question.
Without being so expensive to operate in Chicago, how do they survive? These are questions from the audience, whether they've been answered or not. This is
I'm happy to take that question. Look, one of the things that I've heard from small businesses is that the city has so many regulations and red tape that it's impossible to do business. A thing that I've heard consistently over these almost last year that I've been campaigning is that it could take up to 2 years just to get a sign on the front of a business. The red tape is choking off the ability to do business in the city. So one thing that I would mandate soon on into my term as the next mayor is having a single office that is dedicated to focusing on small businesses, one-stop shopping, so they don't have to go from department to department, hire expediters, hire lawyers, and all the other additional costs just to do business with the city. I think that's fundamentally important, that we have a single place that they can go, both downtown and in the neighborhoods, to get all their questions answered, so that we enable small businesses to be able to do what they want, which is to provide goods and services to their communities.
Thank you. Last question from the audience.
Excuse me, I think I get to answer the question. I think it's really important that city government focus on supporting the business community and not playing gotcha. You know, it takes a long time to get permits. It takes a long time to get business licenses. And we've got to expedite those processes so that people can get started with their business or get started with their project. I've talked to people in the development community who say that sometimes it takes years to get the permits to start a project, that they have the resources, they have the capital to pursue. So that's really critical. And furthermore, we have to have an attitude in the Department of Business Affairs and Consumer Protection that is fostering to our business community and not sort of, as I said, gotcha. Because a lot of the inspection process is about revenue generation and not really about ensuring compliance. And we have to work with our business community to be sure that people are following the law, of course, but not penalize them for petty violations that imperil the business.
We will now have 2 minutes each, panelist, for closing statements. Candidates, for closing statements.
That's a lot of questions. Questions.
We've just been told that we need to wrap it up and stop. So we need to be able to get their closing statements. If you will give them your courtesy, please. Excuse me, I have a question, and I'm willing to go against what has been said. Are you aware of the deeply problematic and systematic issues plaguing CPS today, specifically separate and unequal funding in Black schools, sexual assaults, and bullying?
I'm a teacher by profession, and I know how important education is. It's an escalator. It provides opportunity for all of our people. And we got to be sure that our schools provide real opportunity for all of our neighborhoods. And as I've said, right now you can pretty much predict the performance of a school by the zip code. We have to ensure that schools are well-resourced all across the city, and not just in privileged communities. And that means that we have to change the funding formula. We have to be sure that the schools get the resources that they need to ensure high performance for their students. And that means in many of our schools, we need social workers, we need psychologists, we need professionals and paraprofessionals who will provide wraparound services to our young people and ensure their success in school. That's the kind of commitment that we need to make. We can't just have a per-pupil allocation of resources. We have to have resources based on community needs, and we're not there.
So the question was, are we aware of these issues? Of course. Look, the fundamental challenge that we are going to be facing with CPS, aside from the funding, aside from the need to bring other professionals into schools, is the harm that has been done over the last 7 years. The closing of the 50 schools, 4 high schools in Inglewood, the attempted closing of NTA are huge problems. We've treated parents like they're unwelcome, like they don't have a say in one of the most fundamental things that they expect from government, which is the education of their children in safe and nurturing environments. That's why I've encouraged Janice Jackson. Many people across the city are fans. She needs to be spending her time going on an apology tour to start to heal the rifts that have been created by the way in which CPS has fundamentally disrespected the rights of students and teachers. That is going to be one of our biggest challenges, is to regain that trust. There are other things that are important, of course, but parents have to be welcome at this table when we're talking about educating their children.
Lori, what about my son? I am an infant mom. August 16, 2013, you were investigating the death of Jeffrey Donnell Dobbins Jr., who was pushed over a bridge and murdered. After I spoke with you, I was dragged through frivolous court system. They ripped me apart financially. So I was not fighting for my deceased son, Jeffrey Donnell Dobbins Jr., 32 years old. 32.
Ma'am, I'm sorry for the loss of your son, but in 2013, I had no involvement whatsoever with the Chicago Police Department or the investigation of anything related to it.
He was over
What about Robert Washington?
No, ma'am, I was not in 2013. I'm sorry.
Make your point.
You were.
No, ma'am, I was not. I did not become involved in anything related to oversight of the police department until July of 2018. I'm sorry for your loss. I'm sorry for whatever happened, but that responsibility is not mine.
You made your point. Now we have.
Covered it up for sure. Army
We're
veteran.
Madam,
An Army veteran. 8 years in the war.
Madam,
He died
we
here.
don't want to explain.
He died here.
You're forcing them. You made your point.
Army veteran. Jeffrey Donnell Dobbins Jr. She said this investigation. She covered it up. I spoke to her. I spoke to her. He was murdered in the coroner's office. Said it over. He was suicide. It wasn't a suicide. She had challenged me every forum I went to. Miss Lightfoot couldn't refuse to ask questions. What happened to my son? We have to find her. Every year I called her. She will not respond.
Well, officer,
We know people get paid to do this. We know this is Chicago.
sir,
They get paid to do this.
Sir, let me say this. You want to conclude this now, or do you want to have 2 minutes for a closing statement? Do you want to end it now, or do you want to have a 2-minute closing statement? 2-minute closing statement. Everybody that wants a 2-minute closing statement, clap your hands.
I know.
We'll have a 2-minute closing statement from each one of our candidates. And please, let's show respect. Respect. Respect for one another.
But if she can't stand up,
Okay, can we finish with the candidates now? Let's focus.
Our candidate just wants to make sure that the young lady is okay. Can we continue? Okay, thank you.
I want to thank Chicago State. I want to thank Congressman Rush. I want to thank our panelists and Mary Dee, our moderator. We're very grateful for the opportunity to share our vision for the city of Chicago with all of you. Let me just say, we live in a great city, but in order for it to thrive, we need to focus on growth and opportunity. And it can't be just growth downtown. It has to be growth in our communities. The kind of community development that I focused on when I was alderman, that I will focus on as mayor. It's really important as well that every resident of the city believes that there's opportunity for themselves and for their children in our city, or they won't stay. And we'll continue to see the decline in population that will eventually cripple our city. I've worked hard my adult life as a public servant, a teacher, working for not-for-profit organizations, working in the Harold Washington administration, Department of Economic Development, and then serving for 19 years as alderman of the 4th Ward, and last 8 years as president of Cook County. These are difficult jobs. And being mayor of the city of Chicago is not an entry-level position. I have the experience of working with community residents to solve tough problems. That's invaluable experience. With principals, with parents, and with community residents to improve our schools. With community residents, with developers, with the housing authority to build our neighborhoods. Working with the business community to expand shopping centers, to build new shopping centers, to strengthen our businesses. And working finally with commanders and local officers and community residents to address the violence that plagues so many of our neighborhoods. As county board president, I've worked to strengthen our healthcare system and to address the criminal justice challenges, reform our criminal justice system. That's all experience that I'll take into the mayor's office to serve all of you. Thank you.
As I said at the outset, excuse me, this isn't an election for us to be able to speak our values, to talk about the things that are necessary for us to be able to move Chicago forward. Madam Preckwinkle said in response to one of her questions that change is hard. It's not actually hard if you're resolved, if you're making decisions for the right reasons, and if you're not making decisions for the political reasons. I am in this race because I have not tied into the broken, the corrupt, and political machine that has choked on opportunity for way too many black and brown communities for decades. This is a chance for us to break from that, to move forward in a different direction with an independent leader who's going to hear you and see you and make sure that you have a seat at the table. Now, there are a lot of hard choices that we're going to have to make as a community. And I'm mindful of the fact that the U.S. Attorney's Office and the FBI are going to return a series of indictments that are going to shape this city, probably in the coming weeks. We will not be able to get through that as a city if we do not have a leader who is not part of the corrupt and broken political machine. In the words of Shirley Chisholm, I am unlost and unbought, and the only one that I can give to is the voters of this city. It is critically important that we vote for change. The same old status quo has failed us, fundamentally failed us every single day. And it's not going to change if we keep voting for a corrupt political machine and all of the people who are complicit and silent in the way that it has crushed black and brown aspirations and hope in the city. We need to move forward in a different direction. And I ask for your vote and vote for change. Thank you very much.